go to this creek 5 miles out of town to look at fossils, I'll take you out there and drop you off, and we'll meet in 2 hours and everything, you know. And it was that kind of support throughout my childhood and into the endeavors that I took on later on that have essentially led to any kind of positive thing that I am at this point in time. So I'm forever blessed and grateful by that. And I ended up with the Historical Society in kind of a twisted route. I went from the tourism department, where I was involved with natural history for a long time, to a historic property that the state had called Pawneeville Ranch Site. And it was the home and ranch of a guy who was in the Wild West show business. And the department had asked me at one point to write a position paper about the property and what we did there, which I did. And then 4 years later, they pulled it out of a filing cabinet and said, "Hey, we've got this paper you wrote. Would you like to move to Pawnee and do this?" I was like, I didn't write any paper. Well, ultimately, it was too intriguing to pass up on. And so I got to go fulfill every kid's cowboy wish imaginable. I skinned a buffalo while I worked there. I worked in a blacksmith shop. I jumped from a running horse onto a moving train. The part that the resume doesn't talk about is the fact that the reason I jumped off at that point in time successfully is because this horse, Whitey, I could feel him just wrenching up like this giant coil spring. And I knew that if I didn't leave his back in a minute, he was gonna break in half, and whatever happened to me was gonna be horrible. So that's why I successfully made the leap onto the train. But, you know, I lived outside of town at the bunkhouse of a ranch and took care of a herd of horses in exchange for rent. And so all of my time there kind of fed on previous life adventures. It was very enjoyable. But
How
then
old were you when you did that?
That's pretty young.
I healed a lot faster than those days. After being there for 3 years, they had a great archive of materials, but there was no system for them. And so they had about 500 photographs that some were magnificent, and lots of documents. And so we made a deal that I would go to the State Historical Society for a few months and use their dark room and develop this archive into a more organized fashion so that it would be more useful. And while I was there, essentially the Historical Society proceeded to steal me away from the tourism department, and I was a willing participant in that, you know, because I had a house in Oklahoma City, and it's like, wow, I could live in my own house 7 days a week. This sounds pretty good, you know. And
When was that?
that was in May of 1990, and I'm still there. You know, eventually they'll just put an identification tag on me, and I'll be in there with the rest of the artifacts. Paul said something, you know, when we were walking around in there. He kind of bashful in a sort of way about what Piedmont does in comparison to what we do at the big building down there at the Capitol. And it's none of that at all. It's just the focus is different. You know, Piedmont Historical Society is focused on Piedmont, and I have the state of Oklahoma to mess with. You know, so I need a bigger building. You know, and don't hold it against me. We just need all that space. But the function is absolutely the same, and the value is absolutely the same for both entities. There are people in eastern Oklahoma who feel like that sometimes the Historical Society is acquisitive in terms of our grasp of things that we want to preserve. And And it's not that at all. One of the things that we're really lucky about is our executive director named Bob Blackburn. Been with the society for a long time. And his viewpoint, which flows through the entire agency, is it doesn't matter who has the thing. If Oklahoma's history is being preserved and cared for, that's what matters. And if it's being shared, all the better. And if the Oklahoma Historical Society, as having this kind of big wheelhouse, is part of that process, then we have achieved the highest good that we can possibly do, which is to help facilitate that. The idea that the Oklahoma Historical Society and the Piedmont Historical Society are not the same entity doesn't matter one bit, because we have absolutely the same purpose in mind. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's a high purpose. And in some regards, the Piedmont Historical Society or the Pawnee Historical Society or some other group that is associated with a smaller area is really tied to a more important function, because you also serve as part of the cultural glue of the community. You know, if you guys weren't here, chances are, you know, you'll have a tough time immediately finding somebody to take your place. And then what happens? You know, and essentially you guys are driving this process that may not bear the fruit of usefulness immediately, but if you're in here for that, you're in the wrong club, because essentially what we're doing is achieving something for people who are probably not born yet. And if we can maintain what Piedmont is, where it came from, what its origins are, why it's here. You know, that's the very first question, is why is this place here? Now, that's a real methodical question, as opposed to when I was with State Parks, I had a porcupine for a pet for a while. Porcupines are incredibly stupid. They're very sweet, but they're really stupid. And this porcupine was perpetually looking around like, where am I and why am I here? You know, it was confused about the whole issue. But the other thing is, obviously, porcupines are not very cuddly as pets. But you know, knowing why we're here is key to all the other issues. And the Historical Society provides the essential ingredients for any of the citizens here or any of the visitors here to find that out, either personally or in a larger context. And a lot of times we're doing stuff that you know, we're occupied with the day-to-day aspect of it. You know, we're going to preserve this photograph or this document, and it seems kind of day-to-day, but then again, ultimately it isn't. I had an email this week from a lady in Chicago, and she was doing research on those constitutional issues from 1815 to 1861 that are ultimately really important in terms of today's topics and what's going on. And she wanted a photograph of a portrait, and a couple of portraits, and one of which we had, and the other one, after a lot of digging, I discovered was actually down at the Western History Collection at OU. But anyway, ultimately we were able to acquire that for her. What she was interested in, most particularly, was some information dealing with the Ridges and a guy named Elias Boudinot and his wife Harriet. And Elias was murdered, and he was murdered for the specific reason that he had signed on to the agreement by which the Cherokees came west. He was also very focused in bringing up the Cherokees to have, basically a better life. And so after Sequoia's development of the Cherokee syllabary, utilizing that and English, he was associated with a man named Samuel Wooster, who was a missionary who ultimately came to Tahlequah and helped the Cherokee set up the first press and ultimately the Cherokee Phoenix, which was the newspaper. And so she was interested in the whole story of Wooster, Boudinot, the Ridges, and of which paintings were an illustrated part of that story that will ultimately go into the book. One of the saddest artifacts we have in the collection is also a murder weapon, the knife that was used to murder Elias Boudinot in the dark of night. It was one of those killing Caesar kind of moments. It was multiple people were chosen from a group and they fulfilled that action. And so it's a sad art, but again, it's a telling object. It provides the opening opportunity, the visual opening opportunity to tell a component of the story in a compelling way. If you walk around in your building or outside here in the farm implements, there are objects there that mean something personally to you and mean something personally to me, coming from Oklahoma and its agrarian characteristics that it had. Although I'll tell you straight away, I don't miss the horses anymore. I don't miss hauling hay, none of that. I like living in town. I like indoor plumbing, all those kinds of things. But nonetheless, those are personally, as well as in a larger scale, part of the narrative of this town's life, of our lives as a group. The idea that we can continue this and make it better is, I think,